This veteran was called Deadweight. During the storm, 30 minutes later, he was the only one who flew. Part 1. The man they all forgot. I said, get this veteran out of the hangar. He's dead weight in a crisis. The words rang out like a slap across the cold steel of Red Rock Air Rescue Station, cutting through the static of radios and the rising tension of the incoming storm. Governor Richard Coulter didn't even look at the man he was humiliating. He simply turned back to his staff, flicked a speck of lint off his tailored lapel, and gestured to security to remove the elderly mechanic from the flight control bay. That deadweight was Roland Hayes, age 68, former Air Force captain, Silver Star recipient. Now nobody with oil-stained hands and a wrench in his back pocket. And right there in front of the entire emergency task force, in the middle of a crisis briefing, he was shoved aside, shoulder first, by a junior officer half his age, landing hard against the wall of the maintenance wing. His tools clattered across the tile floor. No one helped him up. No one even looked in his direction. What would you have done in that moment? Would you have stood up for that man, or would you have stayed silent like everyone else? Let us know in the comments. Because by the time this story ends, you might be asking yourself, how many real heroes have we already walked past? It was 6:05 a.m. in Montana. Outside, the snow was already sweeping sideways, clawing at the metal siding of Red Rock like it wanted in. The storm was tracking faster than predicted, Category 5 blizzard rolling in from Canada, and somewhere up in the high pass beyond St. Luke's Ridge Rescue Team 3 had gone dark. No signal, no beacon, just silence. Inside the command room, tension was mounting. Lieutenant June Carter, the youngest flight medic in the room, was the only one who noticed Roland quietly collecting his tools without a word, his face unreadable as always. He didn't flinch when he was pushed, didn't argue when Coulter barked his order, didn't explain who he had been, because Roland Hayes never explained. He just walked out of the command bay, past the dispatch desk, past the young pilots who snickered behind gloved hands. That guy still works here, one of them muttered. Thought he was just like janitorial with clearance. Roland reached the edge of Hangar Bay C. There against the far wall, beneath a flickering overhead bulb, sat Eagle 9. An older helicopter model no one had touched in months. But the frost hadn't claimed her. The panels were polished, fuel lines clear, rotors greased. Someone had been keeping her alive, and that someone was Roland. He stood there in silence, one hand resting lightly on the cold metal. His breath hung in the air, not from exhaustion, but from decision. Behind him, the laughter of the young crew continued, as if he was invisible. But June Carter, she wasn't laughing. Back in the control room, Coulter was pacing. This is what happens, he snapped, when we let ghosts haunt our stations. He's a relic, a liability. Governor, one of the aides started. With all due respect, Mr. Hayes was a decorated. Was Coulter interrupted sharply. We don't have room for was in this storm. We need now. And that man hasn't flown in decades. But in that moment, June Carter's eyes widened. Her radio crackled softly, then went silent. The beacon from Team 3 was gone. Gone. She turned, left the room without a word. Her boots echoed down the empty hall. In Hangar Bay, C. Roland was still there, hand on the helicopter, his jaw clenched, eyes somewhere else entirely. Maybe in the sky. Maybe in another storm. June approached slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. Sir? They said you're not needed. Roland didn't move. But that chopper, she added, glancing at Eagle 9, looks like it's been ready for months. Even the systems read warm. Still silence. Have you been... She hesitated. Have you been keeping her flight ready? Just in case. He looked at her finally. His voice, when it came, was low and even. No one else was going to. Behind them, a burst of laughter echoed again. One of the young pilots was doing an impression of Roland's stiff walk wrench in hand, drawing more chuckles from the others. June turned to confront them, but Roland held up a hand. Not angry, not bitter, just tired. They don't need to know, he said, but she did. She had heard stories, whispers, a classified evac mission gone wrong, a crew that never made it home, and one survivor who walked 20 miles through snow with frostbite on both feet and refused all medals when he returned. June stepped closer. "Captain Hayes," she said quietly, and that word made him flinch ever so slightly. "Why are you still here?" He didn't answer, just looked back at Eagle 9. Then from the overhead PA, a voice cracked through all flight personnel. "Report, Team 3 officially considered down. Repeat, rescue. Team 3 has been declared down." The laughter stopped. Silence fell. June turned to Roland again. "Sir, do you still remember how to fly her?" He didn't reply. He didn't need to. His hand was already gripping the edge of the access ladder, one boot on the step. But just as he began to climb, Coulter reappeared. "Absolutely not," the governor barked. "You are not flying that bird. You're not even certified. Stand down! I checked the system logs," June said, stepping between them. "Eagle 9 is cleared, fully serviced. And unless you have a better idea, sir, that man is our only option." Coulter's face turned red. "This is insubordination." June didn't back down. It's survival. And then behind them, quiet at first, then building a few mechanics, then a junior pilot, then a medic, one by one they began walking toward the hangar, not saying a word. Roland reached the cockpit, opened the canopy, sat down like he never left. The rotors began to turn. Coulter stood frozen. "Who is he?" someone whispered. June looked up, her voice full of something between reverence and awe. "The man they all forgot," she said, "until today." And as the blades roared louder, slicing through snow and memory, the storm outside was no longer the only thing rising, because the ghost had climbed back into the sky. Storms never forget. He's not just a mechanic. He's the only one who still checks that bird after midnight. June's voice cut through the murmurs behind her, as if naming what no one dared to admit. The hangar lights flickered as a fresh gust slammed against the outer walls, and the whine of Eagle 9's rotors began to rise like a ghost waking from hibernation. For a moment, no one moved. The silence inside was heavier than the snow falling outside. But Roland Hayes, former Air Force captain, now just a forgotten wrenchman, was already inside the cockpit, adjusting the pitch control lever with the steady hands of a man who never truly left the sky. If you're just joining this story now, pause and ask yourself, how many veterans have we pushed aside while pretending they were no longer needed? Drop the word respect in the comments if you believe quiet service still matters. Roland's fingers moved with instinct, flipping switches, checking fuel pressure, calibrating flight controls with muscle memory etched in trauma. The machine responded like it remembered him, like it had been waiting, and in truth it had. He had kept Eagle 9 alive through every winter when no one else cared. Midnight checks, engine flushes, blade rebalancing, all for a helicopter no longer listed on any primary roster. Behind him, Governor Coulter's voice thundered again. "You're grounded, do you hear me? This is a state-level operation. You don't even have clearance to fly." Roland said nothing. June stepped in front of the governor, her face pale but unflinching. "If we wait another hour, they're dead out there. You want that on your record, sir?" Coulter stared her down. "This isn't heroism, it's liability." But something shifted in the room. A young technician, eyes wide, called out from the radio desk. "We just got a ping feint, but it's them. Rescue Team 3. They're alive." That was all it took. Roland's voice crackled over the internal comms. Heading north by northwest. St. Luke's Ridge. Estimated flight time 17 minutes. No one gave him permission. He didn't ask. Outside, the storm clawed at the hangar doors, snow whipping in sideways as the blast gates opened. The helicopter rolled forward, its body slicing through the wall of white like a blade drawn from its sheath. Roland lifted off with no ceremony, just cold steel and a breath held tight. Inside the cabin he flew low, too low for regulation, but he knew the mountain like the back of his hand. He had flown that same pass 16 years ago. That time his crew had been laughing in the back. That time they hadn't come home. Now he flew for someone else's crew. The wind buffeted Eagle 9 viciously, forcing Roland to grip tighter. The rotors dipped, caught in crosswinds that would break a lesser pilot. But he didn't blink. He was speaking softly to the chopper now, not to anyone else. "Stay with me, just like old times." Then something happened that even June hadn't expected. Back at Red Rock, she sprinted to the locker room, dug through the old maintenance files. And there it was, a flight log, an old paper flight log in Roland's handwriting, dozens of unauthorized test flights. Always between midnight and 4 a.m., always Eagle 9. He hadn't just maintained her, he'd never stopped flying her. June ran back to the control room, waving the document. He trained for this, all these years, quietly, alone. Coulter scoffed. "That's not training, that's obsession." "No," June replied, "that's loyalty." And up in the sky, Roland was living that loyalty with every breath. Ice crusted the windshield. Altitude dropped. Warning lights blinked red. But he kept going. He thought of the last time, of Corporal Diaz screaming in the headset as the bird went down, of the smell of burning fuel, of waking up under 6 feet of snow alone. He clenched his jaw. Not again. Not this time. Eagle 9 dropped below the ridgeline, engines howling. The forest blurred past. Then a flicker. On his right, smoke. Barely visible through the snow. A trail. Then wreckage. Visual acquired, he radioed in. Approaching crash zone. The downed rescue chopper lay twisted in a half-clearing. A signal flare sputtered weakly beside it. He could make out movement. One arm waving, someone still alive. He hovered, too narrow to land, too dangerous to hover long. He made a decision no one on the ground would have allowed. Roland unbuckled, kept one hand on the stick, and reached back for the emergency winch control. He'd practiced this, alone, at night, for years. He let the line drop, stabilized the bird manually with counter-thrust adjustments. His forearms trembled, his shoulder screamed from an old injury, but he didn't stop. Down below, a medic clipped in 2 injured team members. The line rose. Roland grunted, compensating for the shift in weight. The bird tilted. Back at Red Rock, the team stared at the live feed in stunned silence. Coulter turned away, his jaw clenched, and just then another blast of wind, stronger than before. A tree cracked, snapped, slammed against Eagle 9's tail boom. The whole aircraft shuddered. In the cockpit, Roland bit down on a curse. Alarms blared, but he steadied her, one-handed, breathing like he was back in that Syrian canyon. He got the 2 up, dropped the line again, round 2. But the real twist, one of the crew he rescued, was the son of General Mark Tobias, the same general who had denied Roland's return to service request 12 years ago, calling him mentally unfit for field operations. Now Roland was the only reason his son was breathing. Let that sink in. And if you're still watching, if you've made it this far, then maybe you're the kind of person who believes second chances matter. Subscribe if you want more stories like this about people who refuse to stay forgotten. Roland lifted off with all 4 survivors on board. The chopper was damaged, engines whining, pitch imbalance rising. But the lights of Red Rock glowed on the horizon, closer than they seemed, and behind him June Carter's voice came through the radio. "Captain Hayes, you still with us?" He smiled faintly, blood on his glove from the stress on his knuckles. Still flying. The radio room erupted, and Governor Coulter walked away, silent. The camera zoomed in on the moment Eagle 9 crossed the tree line, battered but upright. They weren't just coming home, they were coming back from history. The flight no one ordered dispatch says no pilots left. I say one's walking toward the pad right now. The words hung in the air like smoke, defying everything Governor Coulter had ordered, everything the protocol said should happen. But there was no more protocol now, just snow silence and one man who refused to let anyone else die the way his crew once did. When Roland Hayes stepped out of the chopper after that first flight, every eye in Red Rock Air Station was on him. His boots hit the ground with a thud that echoed across the bay, not loud in volume, but thunderous in weight. He had just pulled 4 men out of a storm no one else dared to enter, flying a machine no one had touched in years, doing it with hands that shook not from age, but from memory. And yet, as the medics swarmed the wounded and June Carter ran to his side with a thermal blanket, Roland didn't speak. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes said it all. He had been here before. And this time he made it back. But this story wasn't over. Because when the 4th survivor was lifted from the stretcher, a small metal tag fell from his pocket. June picked it up and froze. It was a U.S. Air Force coin. The kind passed only between those who served together in life or death missions. On one side, the emblem of the 109th Air Rescue. On the other, a signature, General Mark Tobias. She turned to the survivor. "Where did you get this?" He coughed through cracked lips. "My father gave it to me. Said if I ever felt I was about to die, hold it tight and remember who brought him back." That's when June's heart skipped. General Tobias. The man who had blocked Roland's medical reinstatement after Syria. The man who called him mentally fractured and emotionally unfit. That man had survived his own evac because of Roland and never told anyone. But worse, he used that mission to climb higher. And now his son owed his life to the very man he had labeled a liability. If you're watching this and wondering how many quiet heroes have had their lives stolen by silence, type honor in the comments. Because what happened next will stay with you. Back in the command center, Governor Coulter sat frozen. The room buzzed around him, calls from Washington press inquiries, and a flight log printed by one of the dispatchers showing Roland had been maintaining and test flying Eagle 9 for over 8 years. Unauthorized, yes, but spotless. He kept the bird alive without pay, without orders, without recognition. Every midnight entry dated and signed, and no one ever noticed, because no one ever looked. Coulter finally spoke, voice low, bitter. "That old man is a liability. He went rogue." June turned to him, her voice steadier than steel. "He saved your reputation, sir. If those 4 died on your watch during your visit with no response, you think the public would forgive that?" The room fell silent. Outside, Roland was still standing beside Eagle 9. Snow gathered in the folds of his flight suit. He looked up at the mountain ridge face, unreadable. But something had shifted. His back a little straighter, his shoulders a little lighter. He was just about to walk away when the alert blared again. "Additional distress signal detected. Repeat, second team is still out there." This time no one moved, not even the new pilot team. Their lead, barely 30, stepped back from his console. Visibility 0. The last chopper barely made it back. And then they all turned. To him, to the man they mocked. Roland didn't hesitate. He turned back to Eagle 9, still steaming from the last flight engine, barely cool. He climbed in. But this time, something changed. A technician followed him, then another, then June. "I'm coming with you," she said, already strapping into the medic harness. He didn't argue, just nodded once. Inside, he ran diagnostics again. The bird was straining. Rotor torque was off, left rudder lagging. But it would hold, because it had to. They lifted into the second wave of the storm this time without radio chatter. No orders, no dispatch clearance, just instinct and memory. The sky was worse now, angrier. The wind snarled like it knew he was defying it. But Roland had flown worse. He'd flown into missile fire with less backup than this. They tracked the beacon weak, blinking. Suddenly it vanished. June gasped. "We lost it." "No," he muttered. "It's not gone. It's hiding." He banked left, dropped altitude, skimming treetops. The wind slammed them sideways, lights flickered. June gripped the rail. "We're losing vertical lift," but Roland had seen it. A glint of red metal between two fallen pines, a flare barely sputtering. "They're down there." He didn't wait for a better angle. He brought the bird in hard, scraping tree limbs, fighting crosswinds. The skids hit ice. The entire frame buckled. June hit the release. The doors blew open. They ran into the wreckage. The second team was in worse shape. Two unconscious. One with a broken leg. One huddled beside the others, eyes wide with frostbite. Roland lifted the first without speaking. June followed. They moved fast until the snow shifted. A loud crack. Avalanche. From the ridge above, a wall of snow broke loose. "Move!" he shouted. They sprinted for the chopper. The rotor blades screamed as Roland threw himself back into the seat, one hand pulling up the winch line. June dove in, the door still open. The avalanche thundered behind them. The snow slammed into the clearing just as they rose. It missed them by 5 seconds. Back in the air, June was crying but silent. Roland flew with one arm, bleeding his shoulder, dislocated from the force of the lift. Still he flew. And this time, when Red Rock appeared in the distance, the lights were brighter, and the people were waiting. Not just the base, the whole town. As Eagle 9 landed, applause broke out. Phones filmed. Veterans stood in silence saluting. And Coulter, he stepped forward, then stopped, because now everyone knew, and no apology would be enough. The return they never expected. "Eagle 9 has eyes on the team. I repeat, we are bringing them home." The voice came low and steady through the radio, but it hit Red Rock Air Station like a thunderclap. Every face turned to the speakers, and in that moment, the entire base held its breath. Against all odds, with a crippled aircraft, torn shoulder, and a storm that had grounded every certified pilot in the region, Roland Hayes was in the sky again, and this time he wasn't coming back alone. The cameras caught it before the human eye. A dark dot in the snowstorm, growing larger, steadier, stronger, Eagle 9 slicing through white chaos like it was born from it. The rotors beat back the storm, the skids shook, the body groaned, but it flew. And inside, 4 lives clung to survival because one man refused to be forgotten. When the helicopter touched down, the entire station burst into motion. EMTs sprinted forward, rescue techs unlatched the cabin doors, and June Carter was the first to jump out. Her face was streaked with sweat and tears, her arms cradling one of the frostbitten soldiers, as if her own life depended on it. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Everyone had seen what she had done. Everyone had seen who had flown them back. But what no one saw, what only Roland felt, was the silence that fell over him as he powered the engines down. The sudden stillness, the hum dying in his bones, the past and present crashing in his chest. He had done it. He had brought them home. The same words he failed to say 16 years ago now echoed like a vow kept too late, but kept nonetheless. His hands, bleeding and raw, slipped from the control stick. And as he sat back, he saw them. Faces at the edge of the tarmac. Veterans, locals. Even townsfolk who had once ignored him at the diner now stood with their hats off, hands over their hearts. Some saluted, others cried, but no one moved. Then something unexpected happened. Governor Richard Coulter pushed through the crowd. He looked different now, less composed, less powerful. He stopped a few feet from the chopper, unsure whether to step closer. His eyes flicked to the cameras already circling reporters, pushing through with questions about the mystery pilot who had saved 2 full rescue teams within 12 hours. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but Roland didn't give him the chance. The old veteran stood from the cockpit, not with pride, not with triumph, but with the quiet dignity of someone who didn't need anyone's approval to validate his service. He walked straight past Coulter, straight past the media, straight into the arms of the mechanic crew who had once mocked him. And none of them dared say a word. If this moment hit you the way it hit us, leave a comment with the word rescue. Because this wasn't just about survival. This was about justice too long delayed finally catching up. The scene shifted. Back inside the hangar, June approached Roland as he sat getting stitched by a medic. Her voice was quiet. "They're saying you saved 8 people, that the entire base might have shut down without you." He looked down at his hands. "I just did what needed doing." "No," she said, "you did what no one else could." She handed him something, then a folded document, an email. It was from General Mark Tobias. Not public, not announced. Just 3 lines, Captain Hayes. "My son is alive because of you. I was wrong. You deserved better." Roland's hands trembled slightly as he folded the paper back. Later that evening, Coulter stood before the State Emergency Committee to explain why an uncertified retired veteran had been allowed to fly without clearance. He tried to spin it, he tried to frame it as improvisation in a crisis, but the footage told a different story. The footage of him calling Roland dead weight, the footage of him ordering security to remove a decorated war hero from a hangar during an active rescue. It went viral in under 6 hours. By morning, 3 major veteran groups had demanded his resignation. And at Red Rock, something else happened. June Carter and the rescue crew gathered by Eagle 9. No cameras, no podiums, just a simple private ceremony. The pilots stood in uniform. One of them brought a folded flag retrieved from the crash site. They handed it to Roland in silence, a gesture that meant more than any medal. He held it, then looked up. "You sure this belongs to me?" The pilot, just 28 years old, nodded. "You earned it before we were born." Then someone started singing, soft at first, an old Air Force hymn. Others joined, even some civilians. It wasn't rehearsed, it was reverence. And Roland, he didn't cry. But he closed his eyes for a long moment and whispered, "They came home this time." That night, alone in the maintenance bay, he returned to Eagle 9. She was quiet now, the engine still. But he laid one hand gently on her frame. "You did good, girl." Then he opened the cockpit, reached into the flight log panel, and pulled out a worn photograph. 5 men, younger, smiling, dust on their boots. He looked at it. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel guilt. He felt peace. Tomorrow they'd ask for interviews. Tomorrow his name would be on the news. But tonight he was just Roland again, mechanic, veteran, and the man they never expected to fly again. Not just a mechanic. His name is Captain Roland Hayes, and he just saved Montana. Those words came not from a speech, not from a press release, but from a 24-year-old airman who had once called him just the wrench guy. And this time the entire hangar fell silent, not in disbelief, but in something deeper, reverence. because everyone now knew who Roland truly was and what it had cost to become invisible in plain sight. The snow had stopped falling. Outside Red Rock Air Station, sunlight broke through grey clouds for the first time in days. Inside, the heater clicked gently above the flight deck where Roland sat alone still in his flight suit. His hands were wrapped, his shoulder braced, but his eyes were open, clear, sharp, and fixed on the horizon. June Carter entered quietly, holding a letter. Not an official commendation, not a medal, something smaller, personal. She didn't say anything at first, just handed it to him and waited. Roland unfolded the paper slowly. It was handwritten with careful loops and pauses. Dear Mr. Hayes, you don't know me, but you saved my husband and my father in the same night. You also saved something else, my daughter's faith in people. Thank you for coming back when you didn't have to. You brought them home. And you brought hope with you. Forever grateful, Elizabeth Anders. Roland stared at the signature for a long time, then folded the letter and slipped it into his chest pocket next to an old photograph and a rusted service tag he never let go of. June sat beside him, her voice hushed. You know they're putting your name up for the Civilian Valor Award. He didn't answer. They're also reopening your military record. You may be reinstated posthumously for the honors you were denied. Still nothing. I think people finally understand who you are. He looked down at his bandaged hands. It's not about understanding, he said quietly. It's about remembering. That's what we're worst at. We forget the quiet ones, the ones who don't shout for attention. She nodded. Well, no one's forgetting you now. Outside the glass windows, a small crowd had gathered. Townsfolk, veterans, families of the rescued. A few reporters too, but no cameras were pointed at him. Not this time. This wasn't about a headline. It was about healing. Then came a voice none of them expected. Governor Coulter. He walked in slowly without a suit, without an entourage. His face was different now, older somehow, like the storm had taken more from him than he admitted. He stopped a few feet from Roland and cleared his throat. Captain Hayes, he began. Roland didn't look at him. I came to apologize. Silence. Coulter continued, visibly struggling. I let bureaucracy and ego blind me. I judged a man I didn't know because he didn't fit the box I thought a hero should live in. Roland finally looked up. His voice was calm, almost gentle. You didn't see me because you didn't need to. Coulter nodded slowly. You're right. And now I have to answer for that. The state committee has removed me from the emergency response board. The veteran coalitions are asking for my resignation, and I won't fight it. There was a pause. Then Roland said something no one expected. Don't just step down, step up. Fix it. Fix the system that forgot us. Coulter blinked. Then quietly he said, I will. He left without another word. That evening, Red Rock Air Station hosted a private gathering. No press, no fanfare, just people. One by one, the families of those rescued came to thank Roland. A mother who had driven 3 hours to hug the man who brought her son home. A little girl who handed him a drawing of Eagle 9 flying through a snowstorm. A fellow veteran who hadn't spoken to anyone in years now offering a quiet salute. And then came a final gesture. The rescue team's mechanics, medics, and junior pilots gathered outside by the flagpole. June stepped forward, holding a folded flag retrieved from the original crash site in Syria where Roland's unit had gone down. It had never made it home. Until now. She placed it in Roland's hands. They never left you, sir. You just kept flying for them. His lips trembled. He didn't speak, but he stepped to the flagpole, raised the banner with slow, steady hands and brought it to the top himself. The base stood still. Hats removed, salutes raised, a moment of silence followed, and then in a whisper that carried more weight than any ceremony, Roland said, I'm just a mechanic. But sometimes mechanics know how to fly. If you felt what we felt tonight, type the word worthy in the comments. Because that's what this was all about. Not glory, not headlines, but the simple sacred truth that no one should be forgotten just because they stopped being loud. As the sun began to set, Roland returned to Hangar C. Eagle 9 sat quiet, gleaming faintly under the lights. He climbed into the cockpit one more time, not to fly, but just to sit, to remember, to breathe. In that space, there were no ranks, no medals, no regrets. Just peace. And before he left, he whispered into the silence, "You brought me home too. Now I leave you." With this, how many veterans do we pass every day without knowing the storms they've already flown through for us? And if one of them stepped up tomorrow, would we even see them? Let's not wait until they save us to start honoring them. Let's start now. Subscribe if you believe in remembering those who never stopped serving even when no one was watching. And if someone you love ever felt forgotten, send this to them. Let them know we see them now. Because he wasn't just a mechanic, he was the man who flew when no one else would. And that is what made him a hero.